In this demonstration, I create a data source view, prepare the schema, create a calculated column, and create a named query. In SQL Server Data Tools, then, I go ahead in Solution Explorer and right-click the Data Source Views folder and select New Data Source View. In the Data Source View wizard, I click Next, and I see then that at the Select a Data Source step, that the previously created data source is available and selected. So I click Next. I then have a list on the left of all available objects, and I'm going to scroll down and select the Fact Finance table, and then click the right pointing arrow to add it to the Included Objects list. Beneath that list, there's the Add Related Tables button, and when I click it, because there were foreign key relationships defined between the fact and dimension tables, we see that dim date, dim scenario, and dim account, the three-dimension tables, have been added to the included objects. I then click Next. And then there's the opportunity to review what the wizard will create and add to the project, and also, if necessary, to revise the name. And I'm going to update the name so that the data source view will be named Finance. I click Finish. And then I immediately save all to follow my best practice of ensuring I don't lose anything should Visual Studio close on me. Now, what automatically opens is the Data Source View Designer. And we can see on the left that there's the Diagram Organizer pane, the Tables pane, and then the larger area is the actual layout of the data source view consisting of tables, their columns, and relationships between the tables. Now, in the left pane, I select the very first table, which is dim account, and then in the Properties pane, here at the bottom right, I then update the friendly name property to remove the prefix of dim. And I'll repeat this for all tables that I've just added. Now, what I'm doing is I'm preparing friendly names so that they will be inherited by any objects like dimensions and cubes that are based on top of them. So I think it's a great idea to go ahead and update these to friendly names, and this can also be done on the columns as well. Let's then take a closer look at the date table. I'm going to resize it so it's easy to see all of the columns. And then when I right-click the header, I can explore the data for this table. And this opens up an Explorer window for the date table, and it allows me to see all columns and a sample of rows. Now, in the top right corner, you can configure the amount that you want in that sample. So we can see here that by default, it's giving me a top count of 5,000. It's also possible for you to go ahead and click on the column headers. Let me scroll to the very far right because I'm interested in producing a fiscal hierarchy based on this table. And if I click on the fiscal year column, it sorts initially ascending. When I click again, I can see that the maximum value in this column is 2019. Let me close that Explorer window, and then I'm going to increase the number of columns in that table by 1 by adding a new named calculation. And I'm going to create a new column that will be named the fiscal year label. And from a snippet, I'm going to go ahead and copy this expression, which concatenates the text of FY to the fiscal year value that is cast as a 4-character. I paste that into the expression box, click OK, and then we see that we've got a new calculation added to the table. Now, when I return to explore the data, I can then inspect what that looks like. And it's very, very common when working with dimensions, because members are defined in terms of a key and a name, that you'll have columns that will give you the key, and that will be my fiscal year column, and the friendly name that users will see as the member name will be this label column. Now, rather than do that for every column, it's my recommendation to you that you actually push that calculation logic back to the data source itself. So let me now switch to SQL Server Management Studio, and I have here a definition to create a view that I've named vCorporateDate. And you'll see at a glance here that I'm defining a lot of columns, and in fact, there are columns that will give me pairs of keys and labels. It also contains a where clause. I'm only interested in building a date dimension for dates from the 1st of January in 2014 and later. So I go ahead and I create this view, and then I'll just execute a select statement on top of it just to be sure that it delivers the results that I expect. Okay, so now I can switch back to the data source view, and I'll choose to right-click and delete that table from the data source view. And then I right-click in a blank area, and I choose the Add Remove Tables option, and as I scroll to the bottom of Available Objects, I find the new view, the vCorporate Date Available. I click to add it to the included objects and click OK. Now there's no automatic detection of relationships simply because views are not involved in foreign keys. So that will involve me ensuring, first of all, that there is a logical key defined, and then I can drag the date key from the finance table onto the date key of the vCorporate Date table. And I've established a logical relationship between the two. I will rename by applying a friendly name back to that table that it becomes date. Next, paying attention now to the account table. Let's take a look by exploring the data for this table. We'll see that the account key is a surrogate key and the parent account key references an account key. So common with general ledger structures is that you can generate recursive hierarchies based on that relationship. We see that the account has a description. Essentially, that will be the label of the account. The account has a type, which is the classification for the account. We also have an operator column. We'll introduce it later, but essentially for a parent-child hierarchy, we can use this column as a unary operator to control how values are aggregated up the hierarchy. Notice at this stage that the values are either a minus symbol or a plus symbol. When I scroll down the bottom, I also have statistical accounts, and the symbol that you see here is a tilde. And the tilde says that it doesn't aggregate up to its parent. There's also a column here with an employee key that designates the financial controller responsible for that general ledger. And so it's my intention that in the account dimension I will have the full name of that employee, but at this stage I can't achieve that with just an employee key. So the way to solve this will be to right-click and replace this account table with a new named query. And that converts the current table definition into a select statement, whereby I can rename this back to the friendly name of account, right-click inside the table pane and add a new table into the query that will be the dim employee. I click Add. And we can see that there's already a relationship defined between them, again because there are foreign key relationships already defined. Now all I need to do is ensure that I select all rows from dim account and do an outer join to ensure that if there is a null or a non-matching value, that we still get all account rows being returned. And you can see that that's then changed the query to use a left outer join. Now I'm going to return to my snippets. I'm going to add in this expression that is going to concatenate the first name to a space to the last name, and if this results in null, it will use the caption of none, and it will alias this as the financial controller column. So I copy that to the clipboard, and then I just come in and very carefully replace the existing column that brings in the employee key and paste in my expression. Let me hide a couple of panes here and then run this query to validate. And you can see then that the name query is great for joining multiple tables together. Here I've used an outer join, and I've used logic that will translate missing values into some text caption. I now click OK. There is visual evidence that this is a named query by the icon that you see up here. I've now completed the design of the data source view.